it's a YouTube channel because that's definitely where it started. We've now got a podcast network of 5 different podcasts. We're talking about doing a live Grouse House comedy festival. In my opinion, there should be Grouse House video games of some kind. We're working on things obviously like a website and merch and kind of trying to make it more of that community. The biggest change would be that growth in business and that business acumen and legitimate companies coming up through online and finding those ways to keep that business sustainable. What I get really excited about is seeing, that's a team that Screen Australia funded 5 years ago for their first ever web series. Now they've got a whole business model around them. Suddenly they're seeing these creators and YouTubers have this deep, deep connection with a true fan base, like fans who will die for them, and they want a part of that.
Lee Naimo, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
You've recently finished up at Screen Australia as head of online, where you were for nearly 7 years, and now you've joined Grouse House as head of creative, 2 incredible roles. One of the things I'm so excited to talk to you about today is what an unbelievable overall perspective you have of how we're tracking in the online space, what's happening, what's most exciting, and who's breaking new ground. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that. But just wanted to start with an overview of your job at Screen Australia as head of online. What did you actually oversee?
I was there for nearly 7 years. When I started, it was a very small department, just myself and Elise Adams were the online team. And even that was a doubling from one person from just before I started. But basically oversaw all of the online development and production funding. That included the direct project funding, but then the bigger partnerships, things like digital originals with SBS and NITV that we worked on together. I skip ahead with YouTube, Fresh Blood with ABC. I'm about halfway through that, added games to the slate. We got games funding through the International Cultural Policy Revive. And so that was a whole new kind of mini department that now I'm really proud to say has spun off into its own unit at Screen Australia and has its own direct funding through Revive and is hopefully growing over time.
Yeah, that's incredible growth. From when you started, how online was seen as a bit of an outlier to where it was when you finished up at Screen Oz, what's the change you've seen in how the space is moving?
I think the creative has always been there for as long as YouTube has been around. There's people who've been experimenting and creating and, cutting through with really great and weird ideas that are often not seen elsewhere, which is one of the beautiful things about online is that there's, it's a space for stuff that isn't necessarily seen on broadcast. But I think the biggest change would be that growth in business and that business acumen and legitimate companies coming up through online and finding those ways to make money and keep that business sustainable, as opposed to just bounce from kind of web series to web series, or maybe being a stand-up comedian and coming back to creating content for online in between tours or other things that they're doing. It now has legitimacy as a main business or source of income. What I get really excited about is seeing, that's a team that Screen Australia funded 5 years ago for their first ever web series. Now they've got a whole business model around them.
And I have to say, a bunch of people that I've been interviewing in this podcast have really successful online first business models that were launched through those programs. Auntie Donna's one of them, Glitch Productions, the McFarlane brothers.
I think one of the factors of being a little bit outside of the traditional model is that the traditional industry doesn't necessarily know that those things are going on. These creators are often just out there doing their thing and building those businesses, building those audiences. People didn't know that online funding was even a thing. Hey, you're an online creator. There's money here for you. They've just been operating in their own world, in their own side of the industry, maybe making online content and building that audience without understanding that, there's support and funding and a whole other side of the industry here.
One of the reasons I think it's so important we're having this conversation now is because that online segment, they might have not been connected to traditional or legacy media, but also now legacy media or traditional media needs to expand and understand what they're doing because they have found sustainable ways to work. And so I think there's a mutual benefit here in us realizing we are one industry. I've been learning so much from hearing what those online creators are doing. You've said in interviews that this is a pivotal time in the industry. What do you mean when you say that?
Audiences are fragmented. I know that's a term that people are probably sick of, but it's true. Audiences are everywhere. And the first question you get asked when you say, oh, you should watch this show is, where do I watch that? What's that on? And because there's not just one or two modes of, of absorbing content anymore. I grew up in a small country town. There was literally two channels, ABC and Win, which was Channel 9. I remember moving to Sydney to go to uni and being like, oh, I can watch Channel 10 now. I can watch The Simpsons. There's more. And I feel like that's the moment the industry's having now with more than just broadcast. There's not just even YouTube. There's, TikTok and Twitch streaming and obviously games is a part of that as well. How do you take advantage of that, both challenge and opportunity to go, right, well, if audiences are in different places, how can I go where they are? And similarly, how can I really deeply think and consider about what an audience wants? Because I do think, and having seen so many projects like this in my time at Screen Australia, people often really deeply want to make that project that means a lot to them, maybe without that consideration of, does anyone else want to watch this? There's nothing wrong with making a project that's deeply personal and meaningful, but I think you've got to spend equal, if not more time thinking about how will anyone else access this and respond to it, and do they want to watch this? That opportunity is really there to create some content that really connects with an audience. I think about the Philippou brothers, Danny and Michael, and their recent movies and success. There's very, very different content to what they made on YouTube, but still at its core, they know and understand what an audience wants because they've spent so long in that direct-to-audience pathway and model that they can create something that is first and foremost for an audience.
Yeah, I think we're really seeing producers and creators being called to account. When you're using platforms like YouTube, the data is so significant. It's not just you who can see your YouTube statistics. People can go to your page and see how successful that is. You compare that amount of data and knowing exactly when the audience are and aren't engaged and at what numbers, to the sort of data blindness that we've had, not so much in the network model, but in the streaming model. You have to be audience first in a way that maybe we lost for a little moment in time.
You've talked about this with Jasmine from Glitch, and I'm sure in other episodes too, but that model flipping and Netflix going after creators like Glitch and their content, and Mr. Beast on Amazon Prime, and seeing those streamers go, oh, we have to partner and support these creators who know their audience so deeply because we maybe haven't nurtured that as well. Suddenly they're seeing these creators and YouTubers have this deep, deep connection with a true fan base, like fans who will die for them, and they want a part of that.
How healthy is the online space and the online creative community in Australia?
I think in terms of what we're outputting, I think it's very healthy. I think we're very competitive on the world stage. Part of that success is due to the government funding that is there for online creators. I think the community part is probably what's maybe not as strong. I think there is a bit of a gap in the market for more of a community event or events for online creators. I think often we do operate in a silo. Things like VidCon and for a moment there, Melbourne WebFest did a really good job of filling that gap. I think there is a need for some kind of online event to bring creators together, and then similarly to bring them together with legacy media. Screen Forever is doing that in a way. Something that is more focused first and foremost on online creators would benefit the industry a lot.
I think that's a really good point. Visibility of that online community becoming part of the broader screen industry more cohesively, so that we're sitting side by side. Tell us about some of the companies that you're most excited about and what it is that they're doing in the online space.
Company-wise, I'm really excited by Dropout. I was surprised by how few people know about Dropout and what they're doing. So, quick history, College Humor was one of the earlier, I guess, kind of sketch YouTube channels, similar to kind of Funny or Die in that kind of vein. Had a lot of backing, grew really quickly, was a real incubator for a lot of comedic talent in America. The current CEO, Sam Reich, talks a lot about it. It was in danger of going under, and then Sam bought the company for $0 at a time when I think they were basically like just want to kind of get the IP and the company off the books of whoever owned at the time. And now it's pivoted into Dropout. What was initially just an expansion of that online YouTube empire now has a streaming service, a subscription service of its own. It's like $6 per month or $60 a year. They encourage password sharing. They're really like wholesome and equitable and really like a good ethos to the company. And they very publicly pivoted away from scripted content a few years ago and now just have a really awesome suite of like game shows, improv shows, Dungeons and Dragons shows, or tabletop role-playing shows. There was a moment there last year when they had an improv tour on the west coast of America and their D&D tour on the east coast, and they were selling out Madison Square Garden for some of these shows. Like they're a huge thing. And the other interesting thing is a few months ago, Sam recorded a YouTube video announcing that they're going to, for the first time in 3 years, increase the price. He was very transparent about just the cost of everything going up. They're going to go from, I think it was like $6 to $7 a month or something like that, but only for new subscribers. Legacy subscribers would keep that same price. And the comments of that video, you could scroll for a long time before you found a comment that wasn't saying something like, I'm going to unsubscribe and subscribe again just to give you that extra dollar because I love you so much and I adore what you do. They've got this really rabid fan base. I reckon it's over 1 million subscribers now. So they're a sustainable business. I'm such a fan of Dropout and the business model.
Well, let's summarize what they're doing, Lee. They've got their niche, which is bespoke comedy, new generational comedy even, and they've created a pay-per-view or a pay-per-month website around that. So rather than just being on YouTube for free, they've now got a website you can go to at a low subscription point. You can buy into that community.
Yes, and you do feel like you're part of a community when you engage with Dropout's content. They also crucially put a lot of it out for free. They put out about 50% of the content on YouTube or other social media for free. So you could, go your whole life without ever subscribing to Dropout's platform and be a fan. And I was doing that for a few months and then went, I think I just want to watch the full episodes or the whole series, and was not a hard decision at that point to part with my money for them. So at a business model level, I think they're really interesting in terms of they're not trying to be another Netflix or Disney Plus because they don't have the depth of content or the bank accounts of those places, but they do have something that is very specific and very niche. And I know people are sick of the term niche, but it's true and it works. They've really found that niche of like great wholesome comedy that feels like you're part of a community and part of a family when you watch it.
Do you know how they find their creators or how they pay their creators that contribute to that platform?
I understand that is very much they own the IP. So they are more, the talent that they'll engage, they will pay on more as cast rather than creators. So they're not necessarily going out and saying, hey, pitch a show to Dropout. I believe that everything that is on Dropout, particularly the recurring series, is IP that Dropout owns. So I know that they talk publicly about paying people for auditions. They did something recently where they made more money than they thought they did in a financial year. So they gave everyone who was involved in the year's work a bonus. So they do look after people, but it's not the kind of place you could go to and say, oh, I want to pitch you my show to be on Dropout. They may get to that point at some stage, but I'm not sure that they have that desire, which is different to Grouse House. We do want to be taking people's pitches and ideas and figuring out a way that we can support creators with those shows that they've always wanted to make and that weird and wonderful comedy series that maybe just is never going to be right for a network or a streamer. So You Want to Win a Penis Pump by Demi Lardner, who piloted that show on a Twitch stream. Then we did it at a show at South by Southwest Sydney last year, Grouse by Grouse Fest. And Demi did it live. She's done it on Twitch. So now we're kind of turning it into, it's a game show shot in her living room, basically. Very, very lo-fi, but with Demi's specific sense of humor. That's just the show she's always wanted to make. So we go, great, let's do a pilot season of that. If that works, how do we, shoot 3 more seasons in, a tenth of the time and make it really more of a machine to get more of that out and build that fan base? Then how do we take it on the road and make money from it?
So this is a really elegant point to talk about what Grouse House is doing. So there's obviously Auntie Donna and all of the many things they do and Haven't You Done Well, which is the business model that sits over everything. But Grouse House is essentially a YouTube platform committed to supporting innovative comedy. And you are looking for shows to fit on that platform. Is that right?
Yeah. Expanding on that, it's a YouTube channel because that's definitely the kind of keystone of Grouse House at the moment and where it started. We've now got a podcast network of 5 different podcasts. We're talking about doing a live Grouse House Comedy Festival. In my opinion, there should be Grouse House video games of some kind. We're working on things obviously like a website and merch and kind of trying to make it more of that community. Community is a nice way to put it. Empire is the capitalist way to put it. But I guess brand is probably somewhere in the middle. We want to inspire, and this is lofty ambitions, I realize, but the same kind of feeling when you look at Adult Swim or HBO and you know exactly that stands for a mark of quality. Something like Adult Swim stands for probably a mark of quite weird. Obviously, it's animation for the most part, but you know what you're going to get. And I want Grouse House to be that as well. people look at it and go, oh, that's going to be good quality, but it's going to be weird. And maybe that's not for me, but if it is for me, then I know that I'm going to absolutely love the shit out of it. We don't want casual viewers. We want people who deeply connect with what we do and feel like, oh, that's the weird, messed up show that I wish had been around for a lot longer.
And I mean, so many interesting things in that, Lee. You don't need everyone in the world to like Grouse House. What you need is to build a strong community of people who love it.
Absolutely. I think that there's plenty of places out there servicing the more mainstream audience. We really want people who, want to watch everything on Grouse House or really, vibe and connect with our shows. And then when we announce we're doing a tour to their city or nearby, they'll come along to the live show. They want to say hi after the show. They want to buy merch. And this is not, being capitalist to try and part them from their money, but we're a business. We want to be a business that means something to people, that people go, oh, yeah, I might churn off Netflix and Disney and Amazon and rotate through them, but I'll never churn off Grouse House as a subscription platform. Again, lofty aims, but the way I feel about Dropout, I don't see a world where I'm going to unsubscribe from them because it serves a need that other platforms don't. So yeah, that kind of real loyalty and, the dream is for people to have parasocial relationships with all the comedians on Grouse House, to feel like we're their best friends. We're not, but we want you to feel like we are.
And the other super smart thing that, again, all of the companies that I know that are really winning the future are doing is revenue stacking. So you're not putting all your eggs into one basket of going, this has to make all its money from YouTube or we can't be sustainable. You're actually going, here's all the ways that we can make money. It can be a podcast, it can be YouTube, it can be live shows, it can be merch, and it's bringing them together that creates the sustainable business models I can see for the future. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to think less about, oh, well, YouTube is the funnel and the way in, and then they'll pay for everything else. And think about everything as both content and marketing. A line of T-shirts or a cap with Grouse House on it or whatever brand on it, that's equal parts something that people feel good about wearing and buying, but also is marketing for that brand. And similarly, podcasters marketing, it's also content. All of the peripheral ancillary social media content that we're doing, the real lo-fi. And I think Auntie Donna are really great at this. One of our podcast brands, The Footy with Broden Kelly, I think is kind of, for me, the gold standard of just, I think they do 4 podcast episodes a week, but they're doing like all of this like ancillary content. They've got a great content creator. Shout out to Paddy Grindlay, unsung hero of Grouse House and The Footy with Broden Kelly. But just his job is to come up with content ideas, either pitch them to Broden or to me or other people, or just go and do them and then go, look, I made this video. It took me 20 minutes to make, but it's in the last few months, 9 of their top 10 most viewed videos were just things that he'd shot on his phone, as opposed to all the really carefully edited, great content that also is the flagship of that brand. People just want that rawness and that authenticity. So thinking less about, oh, we've got to find a way to monetize that piece of content, and think about it as, well, the content and the marketing, they're all kind of, was Zach from Auntie Donna was telling me the other day, he sees it like a grid or a matrix where everything just kind of connects to everything else. Again, people might come into things by seeing a podcast clip come up on Instagram for them, or maybe seeing that there's a live show coming to their town, or hearing a friend talk about it and going and searching. There's so many entry points. You just got to make sure that whatever platform or way people are interacting with content, you've got something there for them so they can get into your business, as opposed to going, well, we just do YouTube and we do YouTube really well, but that's all we ever do. I think that's going to be a problem pretty soon if you have that attitude.
The more content you have that is online and on brand, actually the more valuable your brand gets, because it's got further reach. And that reach also has a value. It's just a different way of thinking about it. And I think when we've come through that, traditional media model where you hide content away, you just put out the show, then you put out one single trailer, like it's a very thin footprint. And the footprint now has to be really broad to reach audiences.
Yeah. Like I knew this company a fair bit from the outside, I would say. Like Screen Australia had funded Auntie Donna's content and Grouse House's content, and, would speak to the likes of Georgia, our MD, regularly, and Max Miller in Auntie Donna. But when I got in here, I'd realized how little I knew about how little we did. Like we do so much for that exact reason, that we just want to be constantly outputting, and people might find that one weird little bit of content that we did, and that might be their entry point into our world. Or if they're a fan of Auntie Donna, we've hired a brand manager, Courtney, who's doing a great job with Auntie Donna's content. A big part of her job at the moment is just going through the back catalogue and going, right, this is a sketch that they might have shot 7 years ago and it was released. Now there's a whole new audience and a much bigger audience for Auntie Donna. Let's re-release that. And she'll tell us comments of like, oh, I love the new sketch boys. And she's like, well, they don't look like that anymore, but that's fine. If you think that's a new sketch, that's okay. Like I think that repurposing of content is something that really great creators do really well. And they're not afraid or ashamed to go, well, this did okay a year ago. I'll re-upload it. Maybe I'll change the music, re-edit it ever so slightly. Maybe I've learnt what part an audience dropped off at. Maybe I'll adjust that video slightly to react to that. And you see those videos sometimes do really well and get a second or third or 10th life.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so smart. It's maximizing the long tail. And also things like, changing the thumbnail or changing that first few seconds. But, all of this kind of flexibility of thinking, going, here's the IP, where can I maximize it? This is the future.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think The Guardian started changing images on its website. I check pretty regularly, and there was one yesterday and I'm like, oh, that's a different image for that. I think you're A/B testing thumbnails for your articles, Guardian. So
Wow.
there's YouTubers teaching legacy media, how to find an audience.
Yeah, for those who don't know A/B testing, it's basically the idea that thumbnail, which is the key thing that people click on, you can have two versions, right? And you can actually try them on YouTube and see which one people are responding to more. Because of, as Colin and Samir say, who are great commentators in this space, if they don't click, they don't watch. So, it's really learning how to market in the new media landscape.
It wasn't an inbuilt feature of YouTube, but people were doing it anyway, just manually changing it. And then I remember being at VidCon a couple of years ago and YouTube announcing that and the audience cheering because they're like, great, we've been doing this manually for so long. Finally, it's part of your infrastructure. We can, upload those two thumbnails and you'll do it for us, YouTube. And I think people are now doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing and making sure that there's, multiple different thumbnails or shop windows that people can find and be enticed to click on.
I think part of it is going to come down to the production companies starting to have to rethink about the roles within the company and who do you have within your company that has these skills to do this kind of level of engagement, not as a one-off when you've got a show coming out, but as an ongoing part of your business model.
Yeah. I feel like Working Dog are doing a good job of this. Like they've got a YouTube channel that is growing. They've got such a vast back catalogue. I reckon that there's plenty of production companies out there that could be just really, really maximizing those years and years worth of content they've got. There's audiences on YouTube who are different to the audience on TikTok and different to the audience on Instagram that have maybe never heard of those shows, or maybe they watched one episode and liked it, but it wasn't offered up to them again in a place that they were existing and consuming content.
And on two levels, firstly, there's money to be made, but also it's building this direct-to-consumer model for production companies so that, as you guys at Haven't You Done Well have already got, no matter what you're promoting, you've got that direct access. You haven't middlemaned your audience to any network. You can use those networks, and if a show's out in the ABC, fantastic, and obviously that's a great partnership, but you're not just reliant on that one stream because you're talking to your audience every day.
Yeah. And Auntie Donna are very engaged with their Reddit community and similarly the Patreon patrons that they've got. They really care for that audience. I don't think you can be 100% reactive to the audience. I think you have to have a vision and find a way to create that is true to that vision. But I think if you're ignoring that audience 100% as well, you're completely missing out. So I think finding that sweet spot of like, what is it that you're really keen and creatively driven by to make? And similarly, what is the audience telling you, either in direct feedback or that implicit feedback of, well, they're just not clicking on that, or they're not watching that, or they're dropping off at that point. That tells you what's working and what's not with that content you're making.
How's the gaming industry tracking in Australia?
I think Australia's games industry has a really, really strong reputation internationally. There's titles from the last few years that have really cut through. You may or may not know about things like Untitled Goose Game, which is tens of millions of copies of that game sold. Unpacking, which won 2 BAFTAs. Hollow Knight, things like Webbed, Copycat. There's upcoming titles like My Arms Are Longer Now, Blacktasia. So many fantastic games that are being made in Australia that are cutting through and giving us that reputation of we've got a cheekiness and a sense of humor and a style that is a little bit weird and wonderful that we're known for. I think the one thing about Australia's games industry is, imagine if tomorrow at a federal level, feature film funding was completely stopped by Screen Australia, including the producer offset, and feature filmmakers had 10 years in the wilderness to find ways to fund and create their content and their features. That's basically what games went through in 2011, 2012, with the Australian Interactive Games Fund just being cut overnight. And there was no offset at the time either. So when Screen Australia got back into games funding a few years ago, we saw that there's just all these creators and these developers who've just been making games without waiting for permission. So even more so than in the creator economy, where I know you talk a lot about greenlighting yourself. Game makers are experts at that, and just building something and then going, "Hey, I made a prototype for my game," and some of the demos and prototypes that we would see in applications were phenomenal, that people had just made completely unfunded, completely off their own back.
What are the opportunities in the online space or the gaming space that producers and creators who know the more traditional model are just not seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I think we've talked about that kind of direct feedback from an audience. Probably the challenge and the roadblock for a lot of those traditional companies and those legacy media companies is just, how do you monetize? How do I make money out of this? There's not a marketplace for online necessarily. And I think we've covered that with things like revenue stacking and that diversification of revenue and just not relying on one income stream. Because as we see those broadcasting, those commissioning opportunities constrict and contract and become harder and harder to come by, and similarly, things like format sales might be less of a thing as we have these global platforms not needing to, you don't need to necessarily localize your series anymore or sell it off in bits and chunks. I think more and more you need to find where can I make money? And if you're doing that in a way that is offering something to your audience and your fans, I think it wouldn't be more traditionally the broadcaster's job to be the ones making that offer of the content. And now it's more our job to go, all right, I've got this content, I've got this merch line, I've got this live show, this podcast, whatever it may be. We talked to the Numac team who run Never Too Small's YouTube channel. They do really well with things like books and magazines and more kind of luxury merchandise and content items that I don't think we're ever going to do. What is it about your offering that is unique to your audience or that makes sense for your audience and your business? There's some things that other creators do that we will never do, and that's so fine, and vice versa. There's some kind of common elements. I think, merch in some form is very common, but there's some creators who will never perform live and they never want to, and that would be their greatest fear. And that's so fine. They'll find other ways to monetize and to offer things to their audience that make sense to them. I think the opportunity there is finding what's your offering to your audience that makes sense for your business, that makes sense for you and for your content, that is a way to monetize rather than relying on broadcasters and sales agents.
Yeah, because there's so many opportunities now. And like you say, like not every platform is for everyone. Personally, I really like LinkedIn. I'm not as strong on TikTok. You've got to find what works for you because you want it to be sustainable in the long term. And that comes down to the big question, where is the money?
I think the money's wherever you want it to be. I think if you can create something that is of value to people, and that may be just creating more content and finding a Patreon style model, that may be merch. It's interesting just to hear you talk about you like LinkedIn versus TikTok. I think that's a really good point, is you've also got to be excited and want to make content on these platforms or want to do what you want to do. I think that lack of authenticity is very transparent. But you can see also when someone really likes what they're doing, like if you love LinkedIn, you're probably going to be inspired to post there more often and build that audience. And maybe there's probably a way to monetize them and to, bring that offering to the industry if you're seen as that industry voice or whatever that offering is that you like doing. Yeah, you've got to wake up and want to do that in exactly the same way as like when you're forming a team to make any kind of screen or any kind of creative project, you've got to want to work together. You might be working with those people for years every day, and you need to be able to enjoy that relationship. You need to be able to enjoy the relationship you have with posting and find a way to make it fun, or find people on your team who are happy to do the things that you don't want to do. And that's something that I've found really valuable in my career. I know what my strengths are, and then I know who the people I'm gravitated to work with on a creative project and what they bring that I don't necessarily. And that's something that I think we did really well in Axis of Awesome. Was we had really clear, like, this is the roles that we kind of more fell into, but were more drawn to, and they complemented each other. So it's okay if you don't love everything. If you're not a marketing person, that's fine. Find someone who that lights their fire and they want to do that and can be in your corner.
And that authenticity, that community, and the regular posting, they're the three things that I keep hearing over and over again. You and I share some things in common in that I think we've both been sort of on that more traditional in-house side, and we've also been out in the kind of production side. What's been the hardest thing for you in moving from Screen Australia back out into the working part of the industry in a production company?
It's so weird to come out, isn't it, Julie, when you come out of that, like those roles. The stability of Screen Australia was something I loved. Being out in the industry, I can already tell that the highs are higher and similarly the lows are lower. I'm more excited about the wins that we're looking at and the projects we're working on. Haven't you done well? And maybe that's just about the perspective of like Screen Australia, you are really servicing the industry and trying to boost other people's creative projects. That's a big part of my job here as well. But I do feel like I've got more creativity and I'm allowed to be more creative in this job. In fact, I'm encouraged to be more creative rather than at Screen Australia. You're trying to play a small part in someone else's creative journey and give them that boost. I've gone from having an office that was mine to sharing an office of about the same size with another 5 or 6 people. And that's a great energy. But also I have a lot of meetings on Zoom and I have to I'll have to find a meeting room. So yeah, that kind of difference in just the structure of a business. So I'm still figuring out how to be non-Screen Australia Lee and have a bit more fun with my work life, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's really valuable, I find, to be on both sides of that because it gives you an appreciation. I always felt as a commissioner, having been a producer for so long, I really respected and appreciated what it took and how much work it took for a producer or writer team to come in and actually pitch to me. And if you haven't done it, it's hard to see. So it's lovely to have those different perspectives. What's the best advice you can give people in the industry right now who are wanting to create sustainable businesses?
Find that Venn diagram overlap of what you really want to do creatively, what's really exciting to you, and is the stories that you have to tell, and where that overlaps with what an audience wants to see and consume. And that is one of the beauties of direct to audience. You can get that direct feedback. There are fewer gatekeepers who are saying yes or no, you can and can't make that. So you've got the ability and the opportunity to go and take advantage of that. I think the advice would be to make sure that you don't preference one too much over the other. If you're just telling stories that you want to see and hear that no one else does, you'll very quickly learn the non-audience for that. If you're just giving an audience what they want, and not making sure that you're tending to your own garden of what you want to do creatively, you won't last very long doing that. It will become very boring to you very quickly. So finding that middle ground and that balance and what you can and can't compromise on, I think is really important and is going to come with a bit of trial and error.
Absolutely. So interesting to talk to you, Lee. I always finish the podcast asking guests to pitch a big idea that they think will make the industry better for all of us. So what's your big idea?
I love this question. I think it's a really fun and useful way to end the podcast. So I've had a bit of a think about it. I think you can get feature film funding or TV funding, but before you do, it comes with a year's worth of intensive boot camp in building like an online presence, a YouTube channel. So you've got to do 12 months worth of audience building to get that 10,000 hours that I know we've talked about. I've seen articles talk about Michael Shanks getting that on YouTube to then go to Together, and Max Miller, who works with Auntie Donna as a director here, getting that on YouTube to then go and direct shows like Optics, and he's working on a feature film at the moment. Getting that 10,000 hours is in an inbuilt way to guarantee that by the time you get to the development, the pre-production of your feature film, you've got that behind you and you really understand what an audience wants. Maybe you'll abandon your feature film and just lean into YouTube and keep building what you've been building. Maybe it's 6 months or whatever, but I think you've got to do your basic training in audience building before you get to get the big pot of money.
I love that idea, Lee. Let's make that happen. Thanks so much for your time. We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions. Always was, always will be.